The rebels, Libyan rebels, should accept power sharing with Gadafi, and I invite first speaker, the Prime Minister of South.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we say that right now Libya is in a position when a long-term war is an obvious outcome of what is happening within the country. We want to end that because we want to minimize civil casualties and we want to minimize the destruction that what war can bring to the country itself. So we say that in case if Gaddafi is actually making that deal with the rebels within the country, the rebels should accept that. Of course, if Gadafi is not making that move and it's not willing to do that, well, in that situation, this is not the debate that we're going to have in this particular room. I will talk about three things. First of all, I will talk about how the rebels are not able to win that war. Secondly, I will talk about what are the harms of a long-term war. And thirdly, I will talk about why Gadafi, if he accepts that power sharing, would probably not violate it, and we have several reasons for that too. Okay, starting with the first thing. We say that if we want to end war as soon as possible, with minimizing civil casualties and minimizing the destruction that the war can make to the country, we cannot let rebels to fight that war in the way that it's happening right now. Because there is no way for them to do that. We already see that airstrikes that the coalition are providing are very specific. It is not helping rebels to take, it's not helping rebels to take the particular towns in which Gaddafi is situated, its own forces. We say that rebels in themselves have very big structural problems with their armies. First of all, they only have light trucks, which are not efficient against the tanks which Gaddafi possesses. Second of all, they are poorly trained, because mostly the army consists of the peasants, of the tribal people and so on and so forth. They are not trained professionals. Gaddafi on his side has mercenaries which he pays and have mercenaries which are engaging in the activity which they are common with, and the activity which actually is their job in life. Moreover than that, the main problem is also that the rebel forces are not structured to the way they should be. They don't have commanders, they do not have very strategic tactics of how to make war and how to actually win that war. That is why we see the examples of, for example, Gadafi or examples of Benghazi, when cities were taken by the rebels, but the rebels were driven away from those cities. And that is why, for example, the rebels are not able to take the capital of Tripoli to that extent, because they are simply not trained enough. They simply do not have. They simply does not have to make progress. We say that we were successful in Gadafi because Gaddafi made a bold move. He situated his tanks in the desert, and we were able by coalition to destroy them. He doesn't make it anymore. He now situates his forces among cities, among civilians, so the airstrikes will not reach them. So we have no possibility, actually, at this point, of kicking Gaddafi out of those cities, and we see that the rebels does not have this ability in there. So what it will bring to them? So if there is no ability to end that conflict quick militarily, that will only result that war will be there for years and years and years, causing country demolition and causing country destruction. I will take you.
We're talking about the notion of Gaddafi's forces. Why do those people respect Gaddafi as their leader right now, according to you?
Why? What people? I mean, yes, Gaddafi does have support for some people in the region when he is situated. It's probably better to leave that region to him and to claim autonomy for another region when he is not that popular and actually govern that region. We say that this is what power sharing will be about, and we are more than happy to do that. Because the second point, what are the harms of a long-term war? We say that, firstly, we already see how the human life loss is increasing, because every single combat, every single fight is a human life loss. We also see examples of coalition bombing its own, bombing exactly rebels because they were being mistaken. This is all the outcome of that war. So what does it mean? That means that the human life loss will be increasing and will be constant through years and years on. We've already seen that, for example, in Afghanistan, when every single week we heard of civilians being killed, every single week we heard of military personnel being killed, and so on and so forth. But additionally to that, what it causes is the destruction of infrastructure. Because when the war ends, in order to live in that country, you actually need that infrastructure in order for that country to function. We say that war does that damage too. It destroys all the roads that you have, it destroys all the facilities that are needed for a peaceful life. Moreover than that, we say it also destroys the oil tanks. For example, we have seen it in the example of fighting for Brega town. We say that this oil is needed for those people in order to function normally. And moreover than that, we say that they do possess that oil right now, because rebel region is the region which is mostly, which has the most oil right now. So it will be beneficial for them just to stop that war, to contain that oil, and to maintain that infrastructure, and to continue on living peacefully. Yeah.
Can you tell me why the biggest harbor, oil harbor, is controlled by Gadafi now?
Okay, well, I don't know whether the biggest harbor is controlled by Gadafi. If you're talking about Brega, yes, that might be, but like all others are simply controlled by the rebels, and this is true. Okay, now the additional point to that, Harms, is that you cannot win that war, especially because he does have support in towns like Tripoli and so on and so forth. So even if you're able to oust Gaddafi, he will still have insurances in those countries who do think that he is the right leader, who do think that he is legitimate. To the third point, why don't we think that he will violate that ceasefire? We already seen that Gaddafi can act pretty rationally when he thinks that everything is at stake. We think that he realizes that this ceasefire will be a kind of thing which is needed for him to maintain power in order for him to remain faced and not to lose all. We see that he already proclaimed ceasefire once the UN resolution was released and was willing to concede to that and willing to stick to that. So this is probably the case which allows us to tell that, yes, once we will implement that, he will not violate it. And even if he will, we will not lose anything to that extent, because of all the proposed.
Right, thank the speaker for his speech and invite the first speaker for opposition, the leader of opposition.
Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm first going to demolish the proposition, and then I'm going to talk about, first of all, how this is going to set a very dangerous precedent. Secondly, how the situation in Libya can improve if we go on with the opposition, with the status quo. And thirdly, how the situation in Libya will not improve under the power sharing model. Now, first of all, about the first prop. Now, I think it's a very poor piece of analysis that they have provided. There are just some supporters of Gaddafi that no one knows why they are supporting. We say that in order to win this debate, they need to show that those supporters are inherently supporting Gaddafi and that we cannot break their support. What we in the side opposition are going to prove, however, is that those supporters actually are already defecting on a daily basis from Gaddafi's forces, and are going to do that if we keep the war on, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what did Misha tell us? First of all, he has this problem about airstrikes being specific. We say that is the policy right now, but it's already about to change. The policies that the US and France are taking on right now are already going to make airstrikes less specific and are going to widen the war that we're going there. So we said it's no problem for us to send more troops, and that is the alternative that the opposition is arguing, not just random airstrikes that they're saying are wrong. Secondly, he says that the rebels have structural problems, they don't know who their commander is. First of all, that's not true, because a lot of Gaddafi's forces are defecting. A lot of Gaddafi's senior officials have defected. For example, the interior minister has defected to the rebels, and he is seen as a commander within the rebels. He has been given amnesty, and he has already solved the structural problems. Secondly, we say that we can also always back them up. The fact that they've started on without a clear structure is good, and we can help them build the structure. Now, secondly, Not exactly, but on they say that, well, there's a problem that we're going to have a prolonged war, such as in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is not a valid example. First of all, because the war in Afghanistan did not start from the grassroots level in there. Secondly, because Taliban has religious support, because the supporters of Taliban are inherently the supporters of Taliban, whilst Gaddafi does not represent a certain way of life or a certain religion, and therefore we say that the supporters of Gaddafi are easily breakable. No, thank you. Now, finally, his analysis of oil tanks is very, very wrong, because he says that, well, oil tanks are going to be threatened if we have order. No, gentlemen. The rebels actually threaten the West, that they're going to destroy the rigs if we do not go there and help them. They actually closed down their harbor, that is the only harbor they control, before we went in. So actually that is going to be the reaction of the rebels. No, thank you. If we say that we're no longer supporting your effort against Gaddafi, they're going to do, because they already closed the harbor and they already threatened us to do this. So that Gaddafi will not. Okay, so we're saying that if we stay there, they will not destroy the rigs, and so the NAFTA or the oil problem is also ours. Okay, no, thank you. Now let's talk about the precedent and what this is going to be. Yeah, by the way, I'm going to talk about the precedent, then about how the situation is going to improve, and then Liz is going to talk about how it's going to affect the international justice and the international criminal court. Now, first of all, we say that this kind of act, or this kind of plan that they're proposing, is going to set an example for new dictators that face the same kind of problems, that they have to be violent against their people in order to remain in power. How this has worked is that we had first uprisings in Tunisia, then Egypt, then Bahrain, and now we're in Libya. Every dictator was more violent than the last one. Every dictator, in order, threatened people more, was less likely to concede to their demands. Now, if we give Gaddafi a share of the power, then the next dictator, for example, right now in Cote d'Ivoire, was going to see that, well, that worked. That if I want to remain in power, what I have to do is be really violent for 2 months against my people, and then I'm going to be offered a power sharing deal that the West is going to support. We said that is a problem. We said that in the end, we're going to lose much more lives that they're claiming to protect by the fact that other dictators faced with this problem are going to react the same way. We say that you can say in the opposition, well, next time I'm not going to offer them power sharing for other reasons. But we said that is not going to help, because what Gaddafi has seen is that rebels, first of all, were really demanding. They wanted him and his family killed and everything and sent out of the country. We say that the Gaddafi example sets that even if the first demands are really big, then in the end we're still going to concede to this. So but this is a very dangerous thing to say. No, thank you. Secondly, we say why this precedent is bad is because it undermines the motivation of future protesters. We say that we need to analyze what motivates you to take the risk to actually participate in a protest, be online or on the street. We say that what motivates you is that you have the probability that the West is going to support you, have the probability that you are going to have the free country that you're lobbying for later. We say that if if we solve the Libya thing in the manner that they're proposing, then there will be less protests around Africa by people that are actively oppressed, because they are going to feel that, well, the West is not going to support me the way I want, and therefore they're not going to risk their lives by going up on the street to march against the dictators. Please.
Okay. Yemen, Syria and Bahrain dictators already using cruel violence against all people. How is it going to increase by our model?
Because we are going to show that the West supports, we're going to show that the West gives you something for using violence. In Bahrain and in other countries, that has not happened. And by the way, dictators may have threatened to use violence, but have never gone as far as Gaddafi. Okay, now, no thank you. Now finally, talking about the situation in Libya. We say that the situation can improve without power sharing. That was situation, we say that it's a very similar situation to what we had in the Baltics in the 1990s, ladies and gentlemen. We also had two different parties. One that lobbied for power sharing with the Soviet Union, and one that lobbied for full independence, ladies and gentlemen. What we say is a good thing that we chose full independence there, ladies and gentlemen. We say that it's a good thing that even though for 40 years we did not have a solid opposition to the Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen, it is still possible to build up a political system without Gaddafi or without the previous forces. We say the same is going to happen there. We say that about 30% of Gaddafi's armies have already defected to the rebels, because their support is based on one sole mentality. Who has power has the values. That is why people are supporting Gaddafi. We say that if we show that Gaddafi still has power, he is going to gain more support through the idea, well, the people will see that he has managed to be stronger than the West, and therefore force West to concede, ladies and gentlemen. So we say that by the status quo, what we do is we continually incentivize more and more people to defect from Gaddafi's forces to the rebels, which is happening right now. We're also going to send more troops, and we say it's a legitimate thing that US and France are planning to do right now. We say that so all in all, what we're saying is that they can build it up the way the Baltics built it up. Okay, it's no problem for them. We say that if we do what they are saying to do, then we're going to send out the message that Gaddafi still has power, so we're going to send out the message that people are going to support him more because of the mentality of power creates values, or creates the power to decide what values are. Now, finally, gentlemen, their idea of this power sharing, we say, is never going to work the way they think, because their argument that Gaddafi is actually rational does not stand on any grounds. What they say is what proves him rational is that he proclaimed ceasefire when he realized that he was going to be bombarded by the West. We say that is not a piece of rational thinking. That is just last desperation. What Gaddafi said recently is that I have created Libya and I will be the one to destroy it. We say that those words are not the words of a rational man, not of a man with whom we would want to proclaim power sharing regimen. Let's avoid another blockade. Please go with opposition. Thank you.
Right, thank the speaker for his speech. Invite the second speaker for opening government now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start with 4 pieces of rebuttal. So first, what they question is this, that Gaddafi is already losing support, and that's a different situation from, let's say, long-term war in Afghanistan, because that support of war is based on religious ideas. We say what happens in Libya, you have to remember that it's structured, it has a tribal structure. And Gaddafi represents a particular tribe that are always going to support him no matter what, because that support is not exactly based rationally, as they kind of say. And yes, the interior minister has fled, but there are many people that are related with Gaddafi exactly through those tribal connections that are never going to change, and that's why he's going to retain at least some kind of support. Particularly, even if he doesn't retain that support, where we say he has sufficient resources to prolong the war. Because if you pay the money, if you can buy the war tech, if you can pay for your soldiers to fight for you, and it's exactly the resources that Gaddafi has, that even if the other people flee and don't support him anymore, he still has the resources to prolong the war. And this is bad for the reasons that Mikhail told us, because we experience war casualties and so on, we destroy infrastructure. The constructive they brought to us is first the message to dictators to be more violent. We don't think dictators will think in that way, because the reason why actually NATO intervened into Libya is exactly because the Gaddafi became violent against the citizens. That became a reason to intervene to protect the casualties, to avoid the casualties of the citizens. So the dictators will see if that becomes, in the Security Council, becomes an argument for intervention, they will definitely want to probably use other means than just violence against their population. And the second thing is they didn't show is how violence. The reason why we come to the power sharing deal is not that the Gaddafi is acting violently, it's because the Gaddafi is having a support and is prolonging the conflict in the first place, right? So it's a special situation for Libya that we are solving. It's not that it's necessarily going to apply to the other countries in the other cases, because just acting violently as a dictator may not necessarily guarantee that support that you need in order to remain yourself in power. Another motivation of protesters, the third point, is that we say, once again, if power dealing is applied in this particular Libyan situation, this is a slippery slope argument. It doesn't mean it applies in all cases. It doesn't mean that in any countries that where protesters would like to protest, they will always think that the final, ultimate thing they can achieve is only the power sharing. It's like if there is a condition when the rebels clearly winning in some other countries, then the ultimate goal can be a non-power sharing, but can be a total opposition coming into power. Yeah, I think this is the rebuttal. I'd like to move to my construct. First point, I want to talk about how it's going to ensure a long-term peace and stability in Libya. And I want to come back a bit to the tribal structure of Libya, like I said. That's what Gaddafi symbolizes, right? It's not just about ousting Gaddafi. Because Libya is constituted of tribes, right? As I said. Rebels predominantly represent different tribes from what Gaddafi represents. Gaddafi represents a particular tribe and a particular group of people that are associating with Gaddafi regime, right? So basically, what happens if you oust the Gaddafi in the first place? Or what happens if you create a government that does not include Gaddafi or somebody that represents that clan, right? Because first thing, we say if Gaddafi is ousted and you're not power sharing with him, then it's very unlikely that that particular tribe is going to be represented in the government in the first place, because they are, representing the losing side. But the second thing, like, even if they are represented, there are reasons why we will never, why the conflict is going to be prolonged and they will never constructively engage into that government. Why is that so? Because if the end of this conflict is ousting the Gaddafi and a total loss of his forces and his supporters, then after creating a new government, his supporters or his tribe will always see themselves as a losing side, will always see themselves as they are not belonging to the government, even if they would have a representative in that government. Because they will see, as the rebels were fighting exactly not against Gaddafi, but were fighting against those people, against that tribe who have been supporting that Gaddafi. So they will never feel as a part of that government. But that's just one thing. Why they're never going to constructively engage with that government. The other thing, that if the conflict is prolonged, right, and that becomes a matter not of countries level, that becomes a matter of personal conflict. Because if the conflict is prolonged, then it means you experience the casualties between different clans. Then the conflict kind of grows not into a conflict between rebels and Gaddafi, it becomes a conflict between clans, because somebody has killed my relative, right? So I will always feel that need to revenge for whatever happened in that particular conflict. We say if we prolong this conflict, this is exactly, you have more cases when that, revenge revenge situation is going to be created. So that's the second reason why in that government that is newly going to be formed without Gaddafi, that particular tribe is not going to engage. But the second thing is that the conflict is going to be prolonged for a long, long time, because the grievances of this long-term conflict are going to remain on the personal level, right, for a long, long time. So there's always going to be a tension inside Libya created, not only because of the reason that that tribe is not represented in the government, but because of personal reasons. Because, somebody killed my relative, I always want to revenge, and that's the tension that is always going to remain. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, even if you take the stance towards future dictators that we're not going to do the same power sharing here, they're still going to hope, based on this precedent, that eventually are going to concede to their demands if they're violent enough.
No, but you didn't show why we concede to Gaddafi's demands because he was violent. We concede to his demands because he has enough power to prolong this kind of conflict, right? It's not about being violent. As we showed, like, violent disarmed the NATO invasion, so it's not a motivation to be violent in the first place, but it is. My second point is what we want to avoid in order to ensure peace and stability is we want to avoid the power vacuum. Because we say the nature of current rebels' governance is constituted of different groups of interest, right? We don't think there is a clear leadership there, right? So what happens if Gaddafi is totally ousted from Libya? It means that there appears a power vacuum, and there appears incentives for the rebel groups that do not have currently leadership to fight between themselves who gains that actual power vacuum, right? If we say we enforce the power sharing, they're all forced to make a power sharing agreement between Gaddafi and the opposition, then they have to, in a constructive and structured way, to fast agree how that power is going to be shared. So they're going to define what kind of leadership is going to rule Libya in that particular transitional period, right? It simply provides a framework that constructively, both their leadership and the way we're going to rule the country is going to be determined. Why is that good? Because we say if the fight within the rebels is going to happen, that even prolongs the conflict even more, that creates tensions within the rebels itself, that creates tensions between different tribes in Libya, which is not going to ensure the long-term peace and stability in that country, and that's why we'd like to avoid it and would propose a power sharing.
I'd like to thank the speaker for his speech and invite the second speaker for the opposition, now the deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are 4 points here, and I'm gonna rebuttal under them. Firstly, about their model, how this power sharing will or will not work. Secondly, our model, how the rebels can win the war. Thirdly, I'm gonna elaborate this case about justice, and fourthly, about the precedent for the future. Okay, let's take it the first point. Firstly, when Arvidis came here and he said that they're so unstructured that they cannot win the war, then how can they do power sharing if they're so unstructured? What we see is that this is going to be power sharing only on the facial value. What is actually going to happen is that that even in the power sharing, it is Gaddafi who is going to force and suppress all the rebels. Because the man who had said on the television that he's going to hunt down in every of those rats and cockroaches and rebels in their homes and kill them, we see that he's only going to lie to the West that he's going to do power sharing. What he's actually going to do is going to suppress all the people the same way he's doing right now. You're going to kill them, he's not going to give them any rights, and the rebels in this power sharing won't be able to fight it. What we also see is that the rebels there, they beg for the West to come to help them. The people, the rebels, the majority of the population hate Gaddafi. Those people hate Gaddafi so much that in the power sharing, they will be not able to make any diplomatic, make anything. It's already says that there is revenge and I want to kill them, kill my relatives. Then how is this power sharing ever gonna work out? Because the rebels hate Gaddafi because he killed so many of their families just for nothing. Okay, so much about that. This power sharing that not work. To the second point, what about our model? Okay, what they're claiming here is that rebels are not winning the war. Mr. Speaker, that is an ugly lie, because what's happening right now is that rebels have been advancing all the time. They've got some setbacks, but they are advancing all the time. And what is the most important here is that every day hundreds of people go from Gaddafi's troops to the other side, and that is the most important here. They are joking at this point that they cannot win the war because it is that Gaddafi's supporters are for him because they are from his tribe. Yes, the support is the strongest for Gaddafi in his hometown, but even people from his hometown have gone to the side of the rebels, and they're going there all the time. And it's not like Gaddafi is a god for them and treating them so well. Gaddafi is using his own soldiers, who are the least willing to fight against the rebels, as human shields. That is what those people who are in Gaddafi's forces feel. They don't want to be there, because the Gaddafi himself treats them as human shields, put them in front of the tanks, and what Gaddafi does to them is also repression. So most people who are on Gaddafi's side really want to go to the other side, and they are doing it. Other thing that they say here, that they cannot win the war because they haven't got enough resources and Gaddafi can get more resources. That is also simply wrong, because the West has got so much more power than does Gaddafi, and we can help and give them more and more resources. As Victor said, we have already discussed very many different ways of fighting it, and we can do it with airstrikes. And the most important thing is, while the West keeps on giving resources, more and more people come from Gaddafi's troops to the other side, and in the end there will be no troops left for him.
Okay.
Before I go on, please.
Okay, so if it is so easy to win that war, why rebels cannot take the Misrata town, and why it is still defended for the weak?
Thank you. Misrata was in the hands of rebels for quite a while, and now Gaddafi has got it again, and it is shifted. Power is shifting, and maybe one reason is that West is not giving enough resources, but it will give more. So the fact that the war is not won right away doesn't mean that it won't be won. Okay, to the third point about unpunished. What they are actually promoting in this side of the debate, that though this person who committed the worst crimes of against humanity that we've seen in a very long while should go unpunished. And we see that as a total harm for our international justice system. We see that we have been moving towards the understanding in the world that there are some crimes that should never ever go unpunished. And one of them is killing civilians just because they were protesting. And we see that it is simply wrong, and it's something that Western people cannot really tolerate. I, as a Western person, I cannot tolerate with all my humanity that this person did something so horrible will go unpunished and will be able to go on leading the country. That is important here. And Gaddafi has been ordered to go to International Criminal Court. And if now the West says that he's going to be able to remain in the government, that is the worst signal it could send. That is the worst harm it could do for the International Criminal Court, who is trying to promote and very well promoting better the agenda that even if you're a state leader, even if you have so much power, then you can still be punished. It is not that you have power that you should go unpunished, and it is totally going to harm all the good advancements we're doing in this field. Now, to the fourth point, which is also connected to the third, is the precedent for the future. It was disgusting what the last speaker said, that because he has power, it is not because he killed the civilians, but because he has power, he should be able to remain in power. That is the worst thing there could be. The signal you're sending out is if you kill enough civilians, if you have traded yourself enough weapons, if you're powerful enough, then you can continue killing your civilians for as long as you want. what they also said was that the problem with that some other dictators have been continuing killing civilians right now. That is exactly because Gaddafi hasn't been toppled yet. But when Gadafi is going to be toppled, then no government no dictator can feel secure in the world anymore, because the West has really moved toward a more humanizing position. The very fact that the UN Security Council was able to pass this resolution to go in there and protect those civilians really marks a shift in the understanding in the West that we are moving towards the future when we don't tolerate such things. And it is really working well. For example, even when the protests started, the Arab leaders of the richest Gulf states started really bribing their people with lots of money, giving out free food, giving out bigger salaries in public sector, and what it means that they themselves felt threatened of the threat coming from West supporting the protesters. And if they do it, that is not enough. My mean is that if Gaddafi is getting the power sharing deal right now, it sends a signal to all the dictators in the future that what they can do is to just gather themselves more power, and by that be able to stay in the power. And that is something that is so much more harmful and kills so much more many lives than casualties in this war that is soon going to end. Thank you.